You think narcissists move on quickly, that they toss you aside and forget, right? No. That is a lie we tell ourselves to try and make sense of the mess they leave behind. The reality is much more disturbing. There are specific people they cannot stop thinking about. People who stay in their minds long after the game's end. In this talk, I am going to explain why. Why do narcissists become obsessed not with everyone, but with a rare type of person? What makes that person impossible for them to truly let go of? By the end of this discussion, you will understand the hidden psychological pattern that traps both the narcissist and their target, and how breaking that cycle can set you free forever. You know, people often assume that narcissists are obsessed with weakness, that they feed on the broken, the insecure, and the quiet ones. And to some level, that is true at the start. They are attracted to those who are easy to control because power gives them the feeling of being superior. But that is not who they stay obsessed with. That is not the person they cannot stop thinking about at 3 in the morning. The truth is this: narcissists do not obsess over weakness. They obsess over strength they cannot control. Think about that for a second. Every narcissist's ego is built like a house of cards, weak, shaky, and desperate to look stable. They live in a constant show, always pretending to be smarter, more powerful, and more in charge than they actually are. And when they meet someone who sees through that act, someone calm, grounded, and real, their entire inner world shakes. That person becomes a mirror that reflects the narcissist's deepest fear, that they are not as powerful as they want to be. You see, a narcissist's fixation is never really about you. It is about what you stand for. You become a sign of something they cannot defeat. Emotional independence, the ability to say, "I see you, but I'm not going to play your game," that is unbearable to them. It is like a child trying to push over a wall that will not move. They do not understand it, and it makes them angry because if they cannot control you, then their fake feeling of superiority starts to fall apart. Picture this. A narcissist spends their life walking into rooms and moving people around like furniture. They play with emotions, twist how things look, and feed on reactions. They are masters of building fake realities where they are always the hero or the victim. But when they meet someone who does not bend, who remains firm and refuses to emotionally react, it is like walking into a room where gravity does not work the way they expect. They push and nothing moves. They manipulate and nothing changes. That is the kind of person they cannot forget. And here is the strange part. The more you pull away, the more fixated they become. Not because they love you, not because they miss you, but because they cannot stand the unfinished story. You became the single puzzle piece that did not fit into their world, and that unfinished tension keeps them stuck. Their ego cannot handle a story where someone walks away untouched. They will replay the conversations, the arguments, the silence, all of it, trying to figure out how they lost control. You might have noticed this in your own life. Maybe you distanced yourself from someone toxic, someone who used to drain your energy and make you doubt yourself. You blocked them, stopped responding, and focused on your own growth. And what happened? They suddenly came back. They texted, called, maybe even apologized. But it was not real regret. It was the sound of a person trying to get back control. Because the second you stopped feeding their illusion, you became the one thing they could not manipulate. And that is what makes you unforgettable to them. Strength, you see, is magnetic, especially to those who lack it inside. Narcissists circle around strong personalities like moths around a flame. They are drawn to the light, but they cannot stand the heat. They want to own your strength, but deep down they fear it will expose their weakness. So they try to dim you, confuse you, and make you doubt your own light. But the more you stay grounded in your truth, the brighter that light becomes, and the more it burns their false image. This is why the most powerful thing you can do when dealing with a narcissist is to remain calm, steady, and clear. You do not have to fight them. You do not have to explain yourself. You simply have to not break. That is what they cannot handle, because their entire plan relies on you losing emotional control. The second you refuse to join in their mess, you win. And the narcissist, though they will never admit it, knows they have met their match. So, If you have ever been targeted by a narcissist and you have walked away stronger, understand this. You have done something amazing. You have shattered a psychological cycle that most people never get out of. You proved to them and yourself that you cannot be owned, manipulated, or reduced. And that kind of strength, once shown, is unforgettable. Remember, it is not your job to be liked by the narcissist. It is your job to see them clearly and to stay true to who you are, because that is the kind of strength that not only protects you, it changes you. It is the strength that every narcissist fears and the one they can never truly let go of. One of the biggest misunderstandings about narcissists is that they are obsessed with people who give them everything they want. Constant attention, praise, submission. But the truth is much more contradictory. The person a narcissist stays fixated on isn't the one who constantly gives in. It is the one who stops, the one who sets boundaries, the one who finally says no more. That is the person who lives in their head rent-free. You see, narcissists survive by controlling emotional energy. They pull people into their world through guilt, games, or charm, whatever works. And as long as you react, as long as you keep explaining, justifying, defending, or apologizing, they remain in charge. But the moment you stop reacting, when you draw a line and stand behind it, something breaks inside them, because you have just broken the main rule of their game: never take your power back. A narcissist's need for control is not casual. It is about survival. Their identity relies on it. So when you set a boundary, you are not just saying, "Don't talk to me that way." You are actually shaking the foundation of their entire psychological structure. You are showing them that their power is not absolute. And that scares them more than anything. I have seen this pattern play out so many times. A person spends years walking on eggshells around someone toxic, trying to keep the peace, trying not to trigger another explosion. They think that by being understanding or forgiving, they will earn respect. But you do not earn respect from a narcissist through submission. You earn their obsession through resistance. The moment you decide, "I will not participate in this madness anymore," you become the person they cannot forget. Let me give you an example. Imagine a narcissist like a puppeteer standing above a stage. They pull strings and the people in their life dance. The strings are emotional triggers: guilt, fear, duty. And for a long time you dance. You respond to every jab, every silent treatment, every manipulative apology. But then one day, something inside you snaps. You stop moving. You cut the strings. You walk off the stage. For the narcissist, that is unthinkable, because suddenly they are left standing there holding limp strings, realizing they no longer have power over you. And that realization does not fade. It haunts them. That is why they circle back. That is why, after months or even years, they reappear with a message, a call, a memory, something that pulls at your kindness. It is not love. It is not connection. It is desperation. They want to see if the strings still work. But when you have built boundaries, when you have learned that peace is not something they can grant or take away, they find out the strings have been burned. And that discovery makes them angry, but it also cements their obsession. There is something deeply symbolic about boundaries. When you set one, you declare to the world and to yourself that you have value. You are not just someone to be used or played with. You are an independent being capable of saying, "This is where I end and where you do not enter." That act, that declaration of self-worth, is the exact opposite of what the narcissist thrives on. They want blurred lines, confusion, and neediness. A person with boundaries stands for order and truth, and narcissists hate both. And it is not easy. Setting boundaries with a narcissist feels like standing in front of a storm. They will rage, use guilt, twist words, and try to make you believe you are the cruel one. But if you hold firm, if you stay calm and refuse to play their emotional game, something incredible happens. You stop being their supply and you start being their obsession. Because again, they cannot dominate what they cannot control. Now, here is the deeper truth. Boundaries do not just protect you from others. They define who you are. You learn your strength by the lines you are willing to draw and the storms you are willing to face. And the moment you realize you do not need their approval, their mess, or their validation, you become powerful beyond measure. So when a narcissist fixates on you after you have walked away, do not mistake that for connection. It is confirmation. It is proof that your boundaries worked. You became the first person who did not crumble under their pressure. And that fact will echo in their mind long after you have moved on. They will keep replaying it, trying to understand how they lost control, but you will be free. Remember, you are not here to teach a narcissist a lesson. You are here to learn your own. You are here to discover that strength does not roar. It stands quietly and says, enough. And when you do that, when you set boundaries that honor your dignity, you stop being part of their story. Instead, you become the one chapter they will never stop rereading, trying to figure out where they went wrong and why they could not break you. You know, one of the most fascinating and sad things about narcissists is that they crave something they can never truly possess. It is not your looks, your success, or even your affection. It is your realness. That is what drives them mad. They are addicted to the very thing that torments them: realness, true feelings, honest words. You see, narcissists live behind masks. Everything about them is a show, curated, exaggerated, polished. They are playing a character in a story that they have written, and they need an audience to believe it. But when they meet someone real, someone who speaks from truth instead of mind games, it exposes the emptiness of their act. That is what makes being real both their addiction and their torment. Most people do not realize how rare being authentic actually is. Being authentic means you are not performing. You are not bending to please. You are not pretending to be something that fits someone else's story. You are standing in reality even when it is uncomfortable, even when it costs you approval. And that is exactly what narcissists cannot do. They live off illusions because the truth is unbearable to them. When they meet someone who is unfiltered and grounded in reality, it is like light piercing through the darkness they have spent years building. It burns them, but they cannot look away. Let's make this practical. Imagine two people in a relationship. One is a narcissist, the other is deeply real. The narcissist thrives on chaos. They twist words, rewrite memories, and make their partner question their own mind. But the authentic person they refuse to play. When they are accused, they do not panic. When they are guilt-tripped, they do not crumble. They simply say, "That is not true, and I am not accepting that." Now, that kind of clarity drives the narcissist crazy, because manipulation only works when the other person doubts themselves. Authentic people do not doubt themselves like that. They may feel pain, but they do not lose their sense of reality. And that is something a narcissist cannot stand or forget. Here is what happens psychologically when you stand in your truth. You become a mirror the narcissist cannot stand looking into. Every lie they tell, every false image they hold on to bounces back at them. They see for the first time what they have tried so hard to hide, the emptiness underneath the mask. And that is why they become obsessed. Because deep down they crave what you have, the ability to be real. But to be real would mean they would have to face everything they have avoided. Shame, guilt, not being enough, fear. That is a kind of death to the narcissistic ego. I often tell people your authenticity is not just strength, it is your defense. When you live honestly, you make manipulation impossible. Narcissists feed on confusion. They need emotional fog to thrive. But being real cuts through that fog like a knife. It brings clarity, and clarity ruins control. You can see this in workplaces too. A narcissistic boss thrives when everyone is too afraid to speak the truth. But the one employee who calmly, respectfully tells the truth, not out of rebellion, but integrity, that person becomes both a threat and an obsession because they are not supposed to exist in the narcissist's world of make-believe. Authenticity is magnetic because it is rare, but it is also dangerous. It demands courage. You have to be willing to stand alone, to be misunderstood, to be criticized. But when you do, you gain something far greater than approval. You gain freedom. And here is the thing, The narcissist senses that freedom. They can feel that you are not controlled by fear, and that both fascinates and angers them. They want to taste it, to own it, to understand it. But they cannot, because authenticity cannot be faked. It must be lived. Think of being real like fire. It gives warmth. It lights things up, but it also burns lies to ash. A narcissist will stand near it, amazed by the glow, trying to contain it. But the closer they get, the more it exposes their fakeness. And that is why they remember you. Not because you pleased them, not because you served their ego, but because you showed them something real. And realness is the one thing they cannot copy. So, if you have ever wondered why a narcissist still lingers in your memory, or why they keep showing up even after you have left, understand this. Your realness disrupted their illusion. You reminded them of something they will spend their entire lives avoiding, the truth. You did not just exist in their story, you rewrote part of it. You left a mark that no amount of games can erase. And that is the power of being authentic. You do not have to fight. You do not have to perform. You do not even have to convince anyone of your worth. You just have to be. Because when you are genuinely yourself, unapologetically and consistently, you become unforgettable. Not because you fed their fantasy, but because you shattered it. You know, one of the hardest lessons people have to learn, especially after dealing with narcissists, is that the moment you stop playing their game, everything changes. Not just externally, but psychologically, spiritually, even in your soul. Because narcissists do not live in reality the way you do. They live inside a constant show, a game of power, status, control, and ego. And they need you to keep playing. They need you to react, to explain, to justify, to defend, to lose your temper, because that is how they stay alive psychologically. But when you stop playing, when you pull back your energy, when you refuse to dance to their tune, they start to fall apart. And that is when you become unforgettable. Let's be clear about something. Narcissists thrive on engagement. It does not matter if it is love or rage, attention or argument. It is all supply. To them, your emotional response is proof that they still have influence over you. It is like oxygen. And when you stop responding, they feel like they cannot breathe. But here's the twist. Instead of letting go, they often become even more obsessed. Why? Because the silence exposes them to something they cannot stand. The truth that their power was never real. You see, a narcissist's world is built on control. They twist reality to stay on top. They twist your emotions until you cannot tell whether you are the problem or they are. But once you stop playing their game, their entire psychological structure starts to come undone. It is like taking a puppet's strings and cutting them all at once. They cannot move anymore. You have removed the mechanism that made them feel powerful, and that realization eats at them. It is like a puzzle they cannot stop trying to solve. Think of it this way. Every interaction with a narcissist is an invitation to a rigid chess game. They lure you in with charm or guilt or pity, but every move you make is designed to lose. And yet one day you push back from the table and say, I am not playing anymore. You walk away. You stop trying to prove, to fix. That is when they lose not just the game, but the illusion that they were ever in control. And that is exactly why they remember you. Because you broke the pattern. You did not lose to them. You grew past them. Let me tell you something about human psychology. People remember the moments that challenge their self-image. And for narcissists, that is exactly what you do when you refuse to play. You force them to confront an unbearable idea, that they are not as powerful, as special, or as dominant as they believe. You represent the moment they could not mold reality to their liking. And because they cannot stand unfinished stories, they replay that one over and over in their minds. But let's not make it sound romantic. This is not easy. When you stop playing the narcissist's game, they will test you. They will provoke you with silence, bait you with pity, lure you with memories. They will say things like, I miss how close we were, or you have changed. And that is exactly what they fear, that you have changed beyond their control. Because when you stop reacting, they lose their ability to define you. You stop being a character in their play and you start becoming the author of your own story. That is terrifying for them, but freeing for you. You might notice something powerful when you do this. The mess starts to quiet down. Your mind clears. You begin to realize how much of your life was spent managing someone else's emotions. That is when you begin to rediscover yourself, your likes, your peace, your purpose. It is like stepping out of a smoky room and realizing how heavy the air was. You breathe again, and that is when your energy shifts from survival to creation. The narcissist senses that shift. They can feel when you are no longer orbiting around them. And instead of feeling relief, they feel panic because their ego needs to be the center of every universe it touches. When you move on, they lose that gravitational pull. They become irrelevant in a story they once dominated. That is why they stalk your progress, gossip about you, or suddenly try to re-enter your life. They are not interested in reconnection. They are trying to take back control. But what they do not understand is that the game is already over. You have moved beyond it. There is incredible strength in walking away, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because walking away is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is saying, I refuse to shrink myself to fit inside your illusion. And that moment, that exact decision, is what burns into a narcissist's memory forever. You become the one they could not manipulate, the one who saw the board for what it was and chose to stop playing. So, if you are sitting there wondering why they still think about you, why they cannot seem to let go, it is simple. You ended the game and you won by refusing to play. You became a symbol of something they will never understand. Real power. Power that does not control, does not manipulate, does not need to win. It simply is. And that is the kind of power narcissists spend their entire lives chasing, but never truly find. You know, there is this haunting illusion that people often mistake for love, especially when it comes from narcissists. It looks like passion. It feels consuming. It seems intimate, almost spiritual, but it is not love. It is unfinished domination. And that difference is vital to understand because it reveals something deep, not just about narcissists, but about human nature itself. When a narcissist becomes obsessed with someone, what they are truly chasing isn't connection. It is control that slipped away. You become a symbol of their failure to conquer, and that to their ego is unbearable. See, narcissists do not love people. They use people to build an identity. They enter relationships not to share themselves, but to strengthen a fragile illusion of superiority. You become the mirror they use to see themselves as powerful, desirable, irreplaceable. But the moment you stop reflecting that illusion back, the moment you assert yourself, set boundaries, or walk away, the mirror cracks. And instead of love, what is left inside them is rage, confusion, and this obsessive need to restore the image you shattered. That is why they cannot let go, not because they care, but because they need to win a game you have already stopped playing. It is a difficult thing to see when you are in it, because narcissists can mimic love so well. They know the language, the gestures, the intensity. They overwhelm you with attention, what people now call love bombing. They put you on a pedestal, tell you that you are different, you are special, and in that moment, it feels real. But it is not about you, it is about what you represent. You are a source of emotional supply, admiration, approval, excitement, and they feed on that energy like oxygen. Once you stop giving it, the illusion collapses, and that is when their love transforms into obsession. Let me explain this through a picture. Imagine a child building a sandcastle by the ocean. They work on it all day, proud, possessive, completely absorbed. Then when the tide comes in and washes it away, the child does not grieve the castle. They rage at the water. They scream, they cry, they stomp. Why? Because the destruction reminds them of how powerless they actually are. That is how the narcissist thinks. When you leave, when you say no, when you take back your peace, you are the tide that reminds them of the real world. And instead of accepting it, they become obsessed with rebuilding the illusion. I have seen this countless times in therapy and in life. Someone leaves a narcissist thinking the story is over, and suddenly the narcissist begins the hoovering phase. They reappear with apologies, promises, tears, but it is not growth, it is strategy. They are trying to finish the control they could not complete. They need to know that you can still be drawn back, that their control still works. Because if you move on and heal, if you truly break free, it confronts them with the one truth they cannot tolerate, that their power over others is temporary and their false self is weak. When you understand that, everything changes. You stop asking, "Did they ever love me?" and start asking, "Why did I believe that was love?" And that is where real strength begins, when you take responsibility for your own boundaries, your own worth, your own healing. Because the narcissist's obsession is not a compliment, it is a confession of weakness. It is proof that you escaped a system designed to consume you. Think about it like this. Real love is mutual recognition. It is when two people look at each other and say, "I see you and I still choose you." But narcissistic obsession is one-sided ownership. It says, "I own you, I define you, you exist to validate me." That is not connection. That is control disguised as affection. And when you refuse to join in that, you become unforgettable, not because they value you, but because you represent what they could never achieve: genuine emotional closeness. The funny thing is, narcissists spend their lives chasing control to avoid being open. But love, true love, requires being open. It requires the courage to be seen without the mask, to risk rejection, to open your soul to another human being. They cannot do that. So instead, they dominate, and when domination fails, they fixate, because your refusal to submit exposes the emptiness behind their performance. So if you have ever found yourself wondering why the narcissist still watches, still talks, still pops up again, it is not because there is some deep, unfinished love story between you. It is because there is an unfinished power struggle in their mind. You walked away before they could win, and they cannot rewrite that ending. And that is why your silence, your lack of caring is so powerful. It is the one thing they cannot manipulate. In the end, your freedom is their torment, but it is also your proof of growth. Because breaking free from a narcissist is not just escaping a person, it is escaping a pattern. It is reclaiming your capacity to love, to trust, to live without fear. And that is the kind of victory that does not need revenge, does not need validation, does not need to prove anything. It simply exists. So what does all of this really mean? It means that obsession, when it comes from a narcissist, is not proof of your importance. It is proof of your strength. It means that the very thing they cannot stop thinking about is not your weakness, but your freedom. They do not long for who you were in their story. They ache for the control they lost when you stopped being a character in their play. And that is the great irony of all of this. You win by refusing to compete. You rise by not engaging. You heal by stepping entirely outside of their illusion. You see, every narcissist you have ever met was in a sense a mirror, a distorted one. And when you finally stopped looking into it for validation, you saw yourself clearly, maybe for the first time. That is what transformation looks like. That is what strength truly is. To stand in the aftermath of manipulation and still choose integrity, still choose peace, still choose truth. So let me ask you, and I want you to really think about this. Where in your life are you still playing someone else's game? Where are you still allowing another person's approval or fear or silence to define who you are? Because the moment you see it, and the moment you decide to stop participating, everything changes. That is when you step out of their control and into your own life. If this message connects with you, if it challenged you or reminded you of your own strength, I want you to subscribe, to share this with someone who needs it, and to leave a comment below. Tell me about your experience. Tell me how you broke free, because your story might be the mirror someone else needs to finally see their own truth. And that is how change begins.